Classic Restos is proudly brought to you by Shannons, insurance for motoring enthusiasts, Hare and Forbes Machinery House, and Pace Farm. To host a show, as I do week in, week out, well, I guess you have to practice what you preach. This car here is very special to me. It's my first barn find from Ohio, United States of America, and you're about to see its story on this week's episode of Classic Restos. So my trips each year have been happening with Mark from Shannons. And of course, Mark's turned into a personal friend over these many years as well. One special part of the United States that we go to is Ohio, to the premises of Murray Park. Now, if anyone's into Chryslers around the world, chances are that they'll know Murray, and he's a lovely guy. We've got a great association with himself and his family. It was the 2016 year, and I was in a position for the first time to get myself a car, and I've waited many years for this. And Murray's place is just amazing. He's got over 1,000 cars, and he's got them on different properties and what have you. And of course, on Classic Restos in the past, you've seen the turkey sheds where Murray has cars that are complete. Some are very rusty, some are parts cars. By all means, none of these cars, it's not as though they're all drivable. But he does have a few that he has kept for a long, long time, with great intentions and plans to do things with. So he weakened in 16 and sold me this New Yorker. Looking through the sheds, talk about a kid at the tree at Christmas morning. I have so much excitement to go there every year and look through the sheds. Some of the sheds and what's in the sheds haven't changed, but there's always that mystery aspect of what he has acquired in this last 12 months that myself and Mark, we haven't seen before. And the sheds are dark, and a lot of the cars have been sitting for many, many years. So here was this long green thing, well, it was actually black, it was covered in dirt. The car came out, it was just, in its entirety, it's a 100% original car. This was at the same time too when Mark found his Imperial. You'll remember that on episodes of Classic Restos as well. That was the car that Mark drove across the United States of America. That was sitting in the shed as well, just like my New Yorker. Talk about a kid's playground. We have fun around those sheds, we really do. It was one afternoon, and after we bought the car, and obviously we had to get it out. The stuff in front of the car, in front of the New Yorker, that had to be removed before mine came out, even that was entertainment. There was one time there where the top of the forklift was too high and nearly took out the roof truss, and Murray just realised that before he had to lower it before he went in. You know, there'll be an engine, there'll be a 318 or something sitting on the ground, and Murray's trying to move it. There was another time I can remember, there's a Hemi, there's an old 50s Hemi with a manual gearbox bolted to it, and it's swinging off a sling. You know, we had to get that out of the shed as well. There was a red 71 Monaco too. It was a 440 car that got pulled out. I think its back wheel was seized from sitting for so long. Then out came the New Yorker. Talk about the respect that I have for these cars, and it all gets back to the emotional side of once upon a time they left a dealership by a very, very proud individual at the time that bought these high-end cars. Who would have thought that the owner in 1967 would ever imagine that all those decades down the track that the car would be found sitting in a barn. This particular New Yorker as well has still got what's called an identi card, which is like a metal credit card that sits just on the inside of the radiator support panel. And that's got the details of the original owner's name. It's pretty faint, it's hard to read. but it's Anna. It was a lady's car, bless her heart. She bought that brand new in '67, north of New York. And these cards were used at the dealership. They'd go in and for their services, and remember the old bank card swipe machines, and they'd take a record of the card each time the car came in for service.
Yeah, the New Yorker, it's a great car. It's your standard well-preserved little old lady car. It's got original paint, never been rusted. Got its usual battle scars from parking too close to the garage door and such. But it's 440, 350 horse, beautiful interior, power windows, air conditioning, everything you'd want in a 1967 car.
My appreciations, I guess, in the time of doing classic restos has changed because I can appreciate something that's been restored to perfection. Outstanding. You see them all the time. Brilliant. It must be how they look back in their time. I can also appreciate a car like mine that has been left alone and it's still got its wheel covers on there, still got its original air cleaner on the 440 with a faint sticker there that you can see. The wiring hasn't been touched. Everything's factory. It's just been left as is. And that to me just means so much. It really does.
We've always had a few cars. They're all special. The T-Bird.
Oh, that's mine.
The Combi for when we want to get away. The XR8.
It's going to be a classic.
They're all insured with Shannons,
We've also got Shannon's home and contents cover.
which helps protect our automotive collectibles, tools and memorabilia in the home and garage. If you're motoring enthusiasts like us, it's got to be
Shannon's.
Shannons, insurance for motoring enthusiasts. Call 13 46 46 for a quote.
If you have a restoration project, Hare and Forbes has the tools that you need. Shrinker stretchers, dollies, mallets, bead rollers, profile gauges, professional panel restoration kits, and so much more. Now I warn you, enter at your own risk because you will end up buying something. So come along to your Cap City store or browse and buy online at machineryhouse.com.au because Hare and Forbes has the range.
Well, this '67 New Yorker, I bought it 15 years ago around there at Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and drove it home with great plans for it. Ran home great, 70, 80 mile an hour on the turnpike. Bought it because I really liked it. Too much going on, got stuck in the barn, and kind of forgotten about for 15 years. Well, Fletch came along and decided he was interested in a car, and he was car shopping in my barns and saw it and had to have it. So we made a deal and got it out and shined it up, and it's off to Australia to be loved, and I'm happy to see that.
One thing I love about Murray Park as well, over in Ohio, is that he wants to save every Mopar that he can, and I love that. I think that that's great. And look, you know, this is my emotional side as well when it comes to cars. I am exactly the same. You want to scoop them all up and you want to, you know, take them home. Of course, that's just totally impractical. But Murray's given it a red hot go over the years. He's like I mentioned earlier, he's got cars that he doesn't know where he's got them kept, and they're cars that were once upon a time probably not even looked upon. You know, with all due respect, not everything has to be a 383 Roadrunner. There are other cars out there that slip under the radar. They don't attract a high price, and they're relatively on the nose. No one's queuing up in the United States to buy them. But when you look at these four-door cars, you get a lot of car with a four-door car. And 9 times out of 10, you get the same drive lines. It doesn't get much better than a 440, 727 torque flight, and an 8 3/4 rear. For your everyday classic car, that's a pretty good score. And of course too, with the higher end cars, you also reap the advantage of the fact that they were never driven very far. And this is where the Americans were different to the Aussies. We'd put 200, 300, 400,000 Ks on a car. Americans didn't seem to do that. Of course there'd be the odd example, But most times when you find these higher end cars, whether it be an Imperial, a Lincoln, a Cadillac, 80% of the time they've never left the hometown that they're actually sold into. I think the people that were quite wealthy at the time that bought these high-end cars chose not to drive them too far, and if they did choose to do any distance, they probably flew a plane or rode on a plane, so to speak, rather than drive their cars. And I think maybe over the time, this is what's attributed to keeping the mileage down. And when you see these cars, and they might have 43,000 miles on them or 63,000 miles on, I used to think years ago, oh, that's ridiculous. You know, that's been around the clock 3 times. But when you find a service sticker on the door with the date and the mileage, or you speak to the owner or the person you buy the car from, and all the miles tallies up, a lot of these cars, that's all they've done. It's not unusual to find a 50-year car that's only travelled 60 or 70,000 kilometres in its life. And of course, the mechanical restoration takes place then. It's not because the parts are worn out because of use, but it's age. Age gets them. Why I look at it is that you replace these parts after all these years, and then what do? We mollycoddle the things. They stay in sheds and we drive them every Sunday, so to speak. That'll see us out. You know, we're buying a piece of machinery that we'll get decades out of, and it's another one saved.
What is it with these big bangers that just jumps out at you? There's just something about the size, the style, the embellishments, the features, their options, built by the Americans. And why? Because they could. This is the most recent addition to the Fletch stable, a 1967 Chrysler New Yorker. She is long, she is wide, visually opulent, and it was built to cruise the American freeways with ease. Wraparound lights up front, wraparound lights in back. Coming or going, it's out to impress. The passenger seat reclines to make a 5-foot sofa, then back to a standard position, hosting 2 separate seats with individual captain's armrests. What a luxury car. And of course, power steering, air conditioning, and power windows is standard for this vehicle. This is Chrysler's legendary 440 cubic inch V8. 1967 was a peak year where there were no emissions control around the engine, apart from a PCV valve. The compression was up 10.1 to 1, and it gave you stock standard power at 350 horsepower, equating to 260 kilowatts in today's metric measure. Although I am wanting to keep this car as original as possible, it is also 51 years old at this point. Some things just need replacing, and that's all there is to it. If you want reliable, trouble-free motoring 50 years on, well, I am starting here. Well, to stop good, you have to stop fast. Sitting for 20 years has given a brake pedal feel about as soft as a house brick. In other words, no matter how hard you push, there's no brakes. And in my case of no brakes, it literally meant no brakes, as the asbestos ruling had all brakes removed in the United States before shipping. When I removed my brake drums, all I had was a wheel cylinder looking at me, and if it's not seized, it'll leak. So of course that gets replaced as well. The rear drums on this car were near perfect. They didn't need a machine, however the front needed a light machining. Next, cracking the brake lines and removing the old master cylinder. Everything came undone with ease. It's just a great car to work on. All of my cars have great springs, stock, but they work. Firstly, it's the rear leaf springs out, so they can be sent away, reset, and put back into the car. Of course, this means rear spring hanger and eyelet shackle bushes are to be replaced. Now, as you can see here, I use a woodwork vise. Gives you good grip and does not mark or score the metal. Some blokes may not agree, but this is my way. Lots of surface rust on these parts, but you would be amazed how easy this stuff came off with a wire wheel. You can see the rubber bushes have perished around the outside, although inside their condition was remarkable. A good way to remove a stubborn bush is to use a socket of the same diameter and tap in from the other side. Next, it was a trip to All Springs at Moorebank, New South Wales, where Aldo has been specialising in springs for years. An inspection was done before a clean-up, a reset, then machining the eyelets for the bush replacement. As you can see, the finished product, painted black, ready to be installed back into the car, looks fantastic. The original spring part number is still visible, along with the Pentastar emblem from Chrysler in Detroit. Today, I'm fitting a brand new out-of-the-box Edelbrock 650 CFM 4-barrel carb. I'm usually a Holly guy, brand new out of the box, just like I've done with my other two Mopars, the 360 and the 340 Stroker, and they both function perfectly. Spanners never go anywhere near them. But the Edelbrock here is the exact replacement. And it's the easiest replacement as well. It's the copy of the Carter aluminium 4-barrel, or known as the AFB. Once the old carb has been removed, I always make sure that the top of the intake is clean to make a nice seat for the new gasket. A quick clean around with some Scotch-Brite works just fine. And whenever I fit a carb, I position it on the intake with nuts at just finger tight, and I open the butterflies all the way before I secure the 4 nuts tight. And the reason I do this is because you may only need to be a fraction out for the butterflies to grab the inside of the intake and prevent them to fully open. A quick check by hand, everything opens nicely, torque it up. Here is a simple swap with linkages lining up, fitting perfectly, the way they should the first time. Connect the vacuum hoses, and I added a fuel filter as well, just because it makes sense to do so. This car has a brand new fuel tank, a brand new fuel pump, and now a brand new carb. It would be silly not to protect it from any foreign material that may decide to take a walk. And now, here is the test. Have a go at this interior. Over 50 years of age. No splits in the dash pad. All switches and panels are in place. All I have to do here is replace my front and rear floor carpet sections. Today it's removing my seats to do this project properly. The scuff plates, of course, need to be removed, covering the top of the sills. Seat belt anchor bolts are also taken out. Taking the seats out, well, it's hard work. Only because they are very heavy to lift. I cannot believe the quality in the seating developed by Chrysler back in 1967. I think removing the floor carpets is an interesting job. You not only get to see what material was used by Chrysler back in 1967, but you also get a good look at the condition of the car's floor pan as well. At this point, you may opt to paint your floor pan, but if it's clean, well, it's the old original thing. I choose to leave mine stock. Chrysler hosted its all-steel unibody. It was tough, tight and tested. The reason the unibody was so strong is because all of its structural steel members, body braces and sheet metal panels are welded into a single unitized shell where all parts contribute to its overall strength. Now, there's nothing new about this technology today, but again, we are talking over 50 years here, and there is no way that our cars today would be so advanced if it wasn't for these benchmark beginners setting world standards. Wherever you saw chrome on a Chrysler in 1967, the New Yorker played host to double nickel chrome, consisting of a layer of bright chrome over 2 layers of nickel. This recipe made the chrome last up to 3 times longer than ordinary chrome. Trims are a mixture of high-quality stainless steel and anodized aluminium, pending their locations on the car. This paint is original. It's not perfect, but it's allowed not to be. Chrysler in 1967 used their acrylic enamel, claiming at the time to be lustrous, durable and buffable. Chrysler claimed that it was the best automotive paint ever developed up to that time. Back in 1967, this paint was oven-baked at Chrysler, proving to be a super hard finish, resistant to marring, chipping, and highly resistant to the sun and all types of weather. Big call by Chrysler back then. Well, over 50 years on, and I guess this paint job has definitely stood the test of time.
I spend a lot of time out here. The RT Charger's the real deal. An E49. Remember A-Charger? I've always got projects on the go, so Shannon's laid-up cover helps protect my restorations. I'm Mopar through and through. It's a passion Shannon's understands. I wouldn't insure my cars and bikes with anyone else.
Shannons, insurance for motoring enthusiasts. Call 13 46 46 for a quote.
Hare & Forbes Machinery House has been family owned and operated for over 85 years, and it's easy to see why. Planning on welding? Look at these welding tables and clamps, air compressors and different air tools, sandblasting cabinets, through to spray guns. Everyone is welcome at Machinery House. There are competitive freight rates around Australia, and you can buy online at machineryhouse.com.au. So remember, Hare & Forbes has the range. Of course, if you own a classic, whether it's a bike, car or a truck, it just has to be with Shannons. Why not pick up the phone and give Shannons a call for a quote and a chat on 134646. And if you're enjoying Classic Restos, keep in mind there are over 315 episodes awaiting you, along with a whole heap of other cool stuff on the Shannons Club. For more information, go and visit shannons.com.au. If you're after a barn find, you may find one anywhere. But when the barn find has to come from the other side of the world on a ship, and before that, on a truck, for a distance, say for example from Mount Isa to Perth, it's always a bit of a daunting thought as to what it's going to look like when it arrives. And here's the car here when it arrived in Melbourne. Now at this point it was, must have been a good 6 months since I'd seen the car, and you walk around the corner and there it is staring at you. And that's at the point where you almost pinch yourself, you know, you think, God, you poor sweetheart, what you've been through. And it just sits there looking at you. Look, it's a machine. I believe that cars have a soul. You might have heard me say that before. I believe that they do. So here's this car that's been rescued in the darkness of a turkey shed. It's been put on a transporter, a big Peterbilt, sent to the port in LA, and now LA to Melbourne. And the first thing that, well, you do worry about is damage, knocked around. And luckily with this New Yorker, there was not one thing that was damaged in transit at all. It was faultless. And that's when it starts getting really exciting, because you know it's home.
Fletch is definitely a real car guy. He goes through my barns, looking at cars, and loves every one of them. He's kind of like me, loves every one of them. Wants to take them all home and save them, which is my problem. That's why I've got so many with no time to care for them. But it's going to a good home. Fletch is going to take great care of it and bring it back to where it ought to be.
It's so exciting to receive your car. Like I said earlier, it could have been a barn find from Bathurst. It doesn't really matter, I guess, where you find your treasure from. It's just a really nice feeling when it's at home. And anyone that's been through the process of finding a barn find, or I guess even acquiring a car, they know that feeling. And it's a very special feeling. It's something that I think only car guys understand. Well, I hope you've really enjoyed this week's episode of Classic Restos, the barn find. I'd also like to think it's a little inspiration for you if you are looking for a barn find yourself. Never give up, and sometimes the best opportunities happen when you least expect them to. As I say at the end of every episode of Classic Restos, until next week, no matter where you're watching the show from, please ride and drive safe. I'm Fletch, and I thank you very much for watching.
You can like and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/ClassicRestosTV and watch catch-up episodes at shannons.com.au. Classic Restos is proudly brought to you by Shannons, insurance for motoring enthusiasts, Hare and Forbes Machinery House, and Pace Farm.